Olms. I'm President and CEO of BioHealth Innovation, and we are proud to be a gold sponsor of the Resi event, which is going to be June 8th through 10th. And we have a stellar panel today that we're going to have on raising early stage capital in difficult times with four experts. You know, there's four experts plus me. So we're going to let the experts do most of the talking. For those who don't know what BioHealth Innovation is, we're a private-public partnership located in Rockville, Maryland, even though I'm broadcasting now from Wildwood Crest, New Jersey. And we basically are focused on accelerating the growth of early-stage biohealth companies in the biohealth capital region, which is Maryland, DC, and Virginia, as well as nationally and internationally. But before we go any further, I think it's important for all of you to meet our great panel that we have today. They're going to give a brief introduction of themselves, a little bit about their company, and then we're going to get into some discussions about raising capital in difficult times, which now we have a double dip in difficult times in America. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So first, I'm going to introduce Conley Jones, who's a Senior Associate for Science and Technology with Alexandria Venture Investments. Conley is coming to us from New York City. Conley?
Thanks, Rich, and thanks for having me today. Yeah, as you mentioned, Senior Associate with Alexandria Venture Investments, where I co-manage between our New York City and Maryland portfolios. Actually grew up in the biohealth capital region as well, so I know it well. Alexandria Venture Investments is the strategic venture arm of Alexandria Real Estate Equities. We're a publicly traded real estate investment trust, predominantly focused on the life science sector and tenants in that space. So, we invest in the life sciences broadly, with definitely some leanings towards therapeutics, life science products, tools, services, and a growing agricultural technology portfolio as well. So, within that, really interested in looking at Series A, seed, and sometimes even a little bit later opportunities within those verticals. And so, over the past few years, we're proud to have established ourselves and maintained our status as the most active life science investor by total deal count in the U.S., with a focus on early stage investments within our core life science clusters on the real estate side. And so on the West Coast, that's Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, and then on the East Coast, Boston, New York, where I reside, Maryland, and the Research Triangle. And yeah, so my heart goes out to any early stage companies kind of dealing with today's VC environment, but I would say things are kind of on the upswing. So happy to get into that a little bit more in this panel.
Welcome to the panel, Conley. Next, we have Andrea Olms, who's a fund manager with BioHealth Innovation and a new BioHealth Capital Fund that's currently in the process of being raised. And Andrea is coming to us from Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's thrilling and exciting. And our venture fund is 50 million. We're out raising, so we're in the same bucket as the entrepreneurs who are raising themselves. So we're feeling at the same time as raising, we're also looking at potential companies to invest in, early stage, Series A, 1 to 5 million, maybe 10 to 12 companies. So we welcome our conversation with you all. Thank you.
And it's appropriate you're pictured next to Conley, who is our lead investor for the BioHealth Capital Fund with Alexandria Real Estate Equities. So it didn't happen that way, but it's nice that you were partnering together on this go-to meeting that we're having today. We have Faz Bashi, who's a venture affiliate partner and a serial super angel extraordinaire. And he also is working both coasts, since he is coming to us, I think, from Silicon Valley, right, Faz?
That's correct.
Affiliated with Boston Millennial Partners in the Boston. So Faz, welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to do a huge mic drop right now because you just did the great intro. Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
I didn't drop the mic, actually. But
okay.
I'm affiliated with Life Science Angels. So my investment thesis all wraps around healthcare and life sciences, and most recently in women's health. So at Portfolio's Femtech Fund, we're investing in women's health and wellness. And on the agri side of things, as Conley mentioned, I'm also getting very deeply involved with animal health. And I made my first investment in the biohealth capital region just last year, thanks to you, Rich and Andrea. I invested in a wonderful company in the territory. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Last but not least, we let the big dog hunt, and we have Chris Barrow, Executive Director, Life Sciences Commercial Banking, and JP Morgan. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me. I don't know about the big dog. There's a bunch of great people represented on this panel today, so thanks for the nice words. As Rich said, I'm Chris Barrow. I lead JP Morgan's Mid-Atlantic Life Science practice for the corporate bank. What does that mean exactly? We're looking for companies that are being translated out of universities all the way to market caps of $2 billion. Our definition of life sciences is pretty broad. It's CROs, CDMOs, spec pharma, generic, med device, diagnostic. And we're putting emphasis on the biohealth capital region just because there's a lot of great companies coming out of there that are not getting enough attention. So if you think of the Baltimore, the 270 corridor, in Northern Virginia, all great areas, great schools, great technology, and we've had quite a bit of success in those markets, and we hope to continue that success.
We are glad to have you present as much as you can be there, Chris. Thank you. So I think what the audience would be interested in is what's the state of capital raising at all stages. Let's talk a little bit about what the investment climate is right now in your world.
Oh, thank you, Rich. So I am based in San Francisco, and the investment climate, let's just look at things just on the short term. It's pre-COVID and post-COVID, and we're yet to come out of the woods with the COVID situation. And so I would say that in this time frame, as everyone's trying to readjust and acclimate to this environment where we're all walking around with masks and doing social distancing, I haven't seen investors in the life sciences and healthcare essentially moving away from the space. I've seen one or two groups, angel groups, and some micro VCs basically say we're taking a pause, but I haven't seen it happen the way that we remember in 2008 or 2000, where everyone just kind of shut the books. But again, I'm in the healthcare and life science arena, and because of COVID, that emphasis of healthcare and life sciences has become even more paramount for folks. Now, the reality is today, as of a lot of things going on societally and across the country, the social and political turmoils that we're feeling right now are creating yet another level of anxiety. And again, it's too early to say what those ramifications may be. But healthcare and life sciences are still first and foremost in a lot of people's minds, and the opportunities in telemedicine and new diagnostics and vaccines are all around us.
And what is the average size of the investments that you and your fellow angels do around the country, Foz?
So individually, we can do anywhere from 250 to $1 million in syndication. So connecting all the dots across the country, we can do a couple $1 million in investments. And again, it depends on the deal. So if it's a big biotech pharma deal that family offices and angel groups and micro VCs have supported, there are many examples where we have gone into the double digits, essentially passing a syndication effort across the country.
Super. And since you are monitoring for the Angel Capital Association nationally, what's going on, are there areas of the United States where angels are more active today than they have been in the past, or just because of what you're talking about post-COVID?
So, the general sense of collaboration, and I'm going to just use the marker of 2008, the general sense of collaboration and partnership and collegiality, and then this effort of syndication has become more and more important. So while there has been traditionally a lot of investment appetite from West Coast to East Coast, There are, again, centers of excellence, and I'm including the biohealth capital region there because that's really kind of where the core of our universities and our IPs have their foundation from. And remember, we all migrated west, so we're a little bit younger in terms of the institutional history. But there are, again, the emphasis on healthcare and life sciences. Those who are already in it know the value of it. And then more and more so, what's happening is people are realizing that there are opportunities around all of the aspects of healthcare and life sciences that need solutions. And so, yes, there are more and more people trying to basically get into good deals from the seed level all the way up to the Series B, C levels.
And then really from Conley, moving up the chain, we have Alexandria Real Estate Venture Investments. And for those who don't know it, Alexandria owns over or manages over 30 million square feet of properties in the top 7 markets in the United States, which would be Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, Boston, New York, Maryland, and Research Triangle. So Conley has a very good national perspective based on what's going on, since they also have been the most active investor in life sciences for the last 2.5 years. So Conley, give us your perspective on how you see the market today, and maybe talk a little bit about what you see the future looking like.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, Fozzie said, you know, a lot of points that, you know, the same things I would have been prepared to speak to. But I think, you know, one thing I'd like to maybe touch on that maybe we didn't foresee going into this is, you know, on the public market side, it's been interesting that, you know, for at least biotech companies, the IPO window is still very much open. We've seen a lot of great performers from new entrants onto the public market, as well as just from large pharma and existing, you know, smaller cap biopharma companies. And I think about this from the perspective of trying to see how that positive sentiment translates over to the private markets, making, you know, early stage VCs a little more comfortable with just investing, period. Because, you know, I think whereas a lot of the institutional VCs with, you know, big, you know, 100 million plus funds, those funds are still getting closed, and I think that capital is still going to be deployed. Where I was a little more worried going into this is more the seed stage investors, high net worth individuals, family foundations, stuff like that, who are typically the first to kind of pull back with investments in a kind of economic downturn or situation like this. And so I hope that you know, they're seeing that, you know, there's still an appetite for investment, that, you know, there's still opportunities for exit for a lot of these companies. And so again, touching back to what Foz said, you know, I think people are viewing healthcare as one of the few kind of bright spots right now of a, you know, a place you can deploy capital smartly and still, you know, see a return on your investment. And so given that, you know, we don't foresee this as being a you know, long lasting, I think we do see the light at the end of the tunnel of what this might look like a year from now. And, you know, I think we're very optimistic that there will be some return to normalcy, and, you know, the venture players from every stage of company stage or creation will kind of get back to work in deploying that capital. So.
One other question for you is, does Alexandria have a sweet spot? And I mean therapeutics, medical devices, biomarkers, tools, digital. Where do you see your primary focus being for investments, Conley?
It's pretty varied, but I would say that just like historically, therapeutics is probably, you know, I would say our sweet spot, so to speak. So we do have quite a breadth of investments, and it depends on the region a little bit. So, you know, Research Triangle, for instance, has, I would say the sweet spot there is very ag heavy. New York, very therapeutics heavy. San Francisco has, you know, a lot of therapeutics companies, a lot more kind of tech enabled tools, service companies. And so, yeah, for us, I would say early stage companies, seed or Series A for our first investment. And then, you know, we tend to follow on after that as well.
Great, thank you. Let's move up the chain a little bit, because BioHealth Innovation and Foz and Conley all try to get things million. So, hey, Chris, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing right now nationally, because you, of course, you all have a national and a global perspective, sort of in, especially the biohealth area.
Yeah, so the space has been very resilient. Of all the spaces, all the different types of industry segments, if you look at the life science healthcare space, it was the first to recover. It's first to, it didn't get impacted as much in the stock market. To Faz and to Colleen's points, respect to capital being deployed, continues to be deployed. Not as quickly as it was before, and you've got like 3 buckets in terms of the VCs. Those are still in, those institutional investors, ton of money on a ton of money. They have to get that money deployed, so they're moving their money forward. Then you have this third tier, that second tier says, hey, we want to still invest, but we're going to take our time. And then the third tier is like, hey, we're just going to wait. We're not sure where the market's going to be, and we're just on the sidelines. The public markets have been tremendous still. 25 IPOs in the last three to 4 months. The valuations continue to be roughly, pre-money valuations of $450 before the IPO to $650 million post IPO. What's been impressive has been the follow-ons. If you have good innovation, if you have a story, if you continue to have progress in your science, you're able to raise capital, which has been very good, right? So those companies that, especially therapeutics, are capital intensive. They need a lot of capital. They've been able to raise money, and I've been surprised. We were saying that 2020 was going to be a tough year. Forget COVID, just with the election. And so we were recommending to people to get out if you wanted to raise money before June. I think with this COVID-19, you're going to see less people taking vacation, and you're going to be able to get access to people. So capital's still going to be there. I think come the primary season of both the conventions, you're going to have a few little issues there. And so the window will get smaller, but capital is available, definitely available.
Yeah, I agree. Just on what Chris said, I mean, I was watching Bloomberg and I saw, was it Greg Becker from Silicon Valley Bank? He was saying just this year, 2020, 18 IPOs in healthcare. I mean, that's just amazing. And even Wilson Sonsini's entrepreneur report showed that the valuations from seed are the same as in Q4 2019 at about 9 million. And even Series A stayed the same. Series B went down, reported. And then, Series C went up a little bit, it said. So I was really surprised on that front too, that it stayed. But I think I would add to Faz's comment. He said pre-COVID and post. I would add another era during, because it was during that I was surprised to see that even under the angel funds and the fund leaders and even micro VCs were coming together during the COVID, the initial freezing stage, just to hear what each other were saying. And so one meeting I attended was just the Southeast Angel family and funds. 30 of them showed up. Only one said they was going to shut down and not, invest. And all of them were looking for deals. They were surprised that their inboxes didn't get COVID, and yet it seemed like it was frozen. So, part of it was also the entrepreneurs on their side. They too need to realize that, the funds haven't shriveled up. They still want to look at some deals. And please don't shut down and keep submitting those plans. And I was heartwarmed to hear that some were emerging out of their situation to do so. In terms of the deal rounds at this kind of angel and micro VC stage, some of the companies themselves, not by the money putting in, but by themselves, were accepting lower rounds, like smaller rounds. So instead of going for, like $1 million, 2 million, 5 million, they said maybe we'll just do $500,000 out of panic or fear that the money would dry up. When in fact, I wasn't really sure that was even the case, because the money on the sideline was still there. It hadn't really gone anywhere. So there was like little anecdotal stories that I would see through that during the in COVID, the pure lockdown when everyone was locked down. And I thought also was interesting was the Asian markets. So further up the stream with institutional LPs, I attended a couple of ILPA Asian market reportings. And just as we were getting locked down into COVID, they were opening up. That means the Asian markets. And they were looking at where to place the money. And what was interesting is that they were kitting our Series B raise to their small cap public markets and how that was doing. And that was starting to rebound. So a lot of that Chinese money was actually coming into the US to look for deals that were at this low, they were expecting lower valuations. And it was interesting to see how that played out. In fact, Rich and I actually were on a call with an 800 million Chinese venture capital firm here, located here, looking for deals. They were looking for deals no smaller than 50 million. He's like, Andrea, you have any $50 million deals for me? I mean, that's kind of a high level
we have
problem
one
to
fund, they
have.
can place the whole 50.
Yeah, I said, please bring it here. We have exits. Mirabai, was acquired, and that was a Q1 2020 deal. So we're really thrilled.
So a lot of different perspectives from each of you, which is good. Now that's more from the investor side. Let's look at it from the entrepreneurial side. I'm an entrepreneur out there. I'm looking for funding. And tell me what you, as an investor at the stage you invest in, is looking for. How should I package myself today? How should I approach you today in this virtual world? And what has changed? Is that, from the climate, from an entrepreneurial perspective, trying to get access to your money? So let's start again with Foz.
So Rich, that's a very good question. So in this time where we're doing virtual meetings and talking to one another and trying to get to know what the entrepreneur is all about, trying to understand nuances and body language, it's an interesting time. So the approach to me or to the venture funds is really very similar as it was in the past, right? If you have a warm intro, please use the warm intro to get into whatever system that people have. Emails are still obviously working, as Andrea rightfully said. Our inboxes do not have COVID, but so the challenge is my inbox is filling up really, really quickly, and it is tough to manage the entire deal flow because people do have a lot more time now to be able to spend on emails and connections and meeting requests. And I'm sure I can go around and ask everyone, you're probably busier than you've ever been before. But the opportunity online now is, how do we get to know one another in a meaningful way so that we get really to the level of building a relationship? And it is difficult to build trust just online. So I'm looking forward to the day where we can actually all kind of meet each other in person again for coffee or drinks or whatever. But I don't see much of the process really changing much. It's just I find myself having more opportunities to meet more entrepreneurs than I did in the past.
I think all of us are in that position right now, Foz, and managing that inbox becomes a little more of a challenge from a priority setting. So Conley, from your perspective, what about people interested in accessing funds from Alexandria?
Yeah, I mean, we're still active. We're still engaged in a lot of diligence. I would say maybe it differs a little bit by the stage of the company. So obviously follow-on are getting high priority, a lot of attention. But outside of those, given that we're typically operating as a co-investor in a lot of these rounds, we're not typically leading or co-leading. I think for a company to come to us, they need to at least have a few people around the table, especially at a time like now where we might be relying on maybe a blue chip syndicate coming into place or someone else around the table that can vouch for a certain company as an extra validation step for us. Otherwise, we're just kind of pushing things through completely virtually, which may have to be the new norm for the remainder of the year. And I think we are potentially okay with that. Understanding it's not ideal, but I think if for a company to come to us, I think it's important to have a few people around the table, maybe some dollars soft circled, for the early stage companies, you know, we are a huge proponent of SBIR funding. We see that as, you know, a big validating step for a lot of these companies, and more importantly now than ever, I think, you know, the NIH funding hasn't been affected by this. They're still deploying capital left and right, and so you know, while maybe you're still waiting for angel and high net worth individual and family foundations to kind of get their strategy back on track, like, take a look at SBIR funding opportunities that are out there, because you know, that's still alive and well. And if you have a kind of COVID application you're working on, there's even more money for you. So definitely don't overlook that, because I see a lot of companies trying to like think, you know, okay, we're going to close this seed stage deal in, you know, 2 months. 8 months later, they still don't have all the money there. So like, you know, think about this non-dilutive funding. It's, you know, has different strings attached, but it can be very advantageous at a time like this where some doors are closed. So yeah, so with that said, I think, you know, have some conversations already ongoing with other investors, you know, and you know, we're happy to speak with those investors to get their sense of, you know, their interest in the company and how we could potentially build a syndicate. So that syndicate building opportunity is something we take really seriously and are happy to take a part in. We just can't take a whole deal ourselves. Is kind of how we see things.
Yeah, thanks, Conley. I'm glad you brought up the non-dilutive funding and the NIH funding, because as of course all of the equity investors love it because it doesn't change their cap table. And you know, there's a lot of money sitting out there, if especially now with the COVID. There's a lot of new grant money available with COVID-19, several $billion worth. We've helped over 10 companies just in the last 2 weeks with grant applications applying for COVID-19 grants. And by the way, another Resi panel that BioHealth Innovation is sponsoring is Growing Your Company with Non-Dilutive Funding, which Judy Costello from BioHealth Innovation will be leading. There'll be details on the Resi site about that non-dilutive panel, and I would recommend anybody interested in that tune into that panel as well. So let's progress to Chris Barrow again with JP Morgan, who's dealing with general companies. And Chris, I guess during this period, are you seeing many new companies, or are you really cultivating people you have relationships with for a long time, looking at M&A activity and IPO activity, major tranches?
That's a great question. It's something we think about a lot right now. So we are talking to all our clients, all our prospects. We're talking to our prospects even further now, trying to figure out how to help them more. But what I worry about is in pure business development, that one-on-one connection you make when you meet face-to-face. And I worry not just for JP Morgan, but I worry for the early stage companies, right? We emphasize strongly that wherever you're located, there's seed funding there probably, but you need to get beyond your comfort zone in terms of geography and look outside of those boundaries. And it's difficult to meet the Fazes or the Collier Jones if you don't know they're out there. So that's what we're trying to do as much as possible. We're trying to build up our Rolodex of seed investors through you know, crossover rounds, and help our companies meet those types of people. So we're always looking for other investors who are willing to take a call or email from JP Morgan and say, hey, we've got this interesting company that's seeking funding. Companies that have been out there, who've been through the process or going through the process, continue to have great conversations. Companies who've raised capital before, have gone through the process, know what to do. It's those guys and ladies who are coming out of universities who've never done it before, and all of a sudden, okay, I've got to raise $1 million. Now, in this space, $1 million is not a lot of money, especially in the therapeutic side, right? When it costs you $500 million to get a drug through approval. But if it's your first time raising $1 billion, it's huge. So leaning on groups like BioHealth Innovation, figuring out how to get non-dilutive funding, absolutely everything. And so we try to assist those kind of companies. And part of our assistance is our Rolodex, but also sitting down with them and listening to their pitch. because a lot of times these investors don't know, these companies don't know how to pitch to investors. They're used to dealing with scientific folks and giving these long, broad, deep conversations about the science. But really, Faz and Conley are looking for, how do I get, if I put some money in, how do I get to my exit or inflection point? Where's the value creation? And how do I build a team to do so? So that's the help we're trying to do these days.
Oops, thank you, Christian.
Everyone mentioned so much, Rich, but there were
Yeah.
two things that wasn't mentioned. So I was waiting. And one had to do with the clinical trials in COVID, when you're doing the due diligence on the companies. And then the other had to do with this face-to-face. So I was at another panel participating, and the question was asked, would you ever put in money in someone you never ever met? I mean, in person, not Zoom. And around the table of the venture capitalists, one was a $10 billion, shop. They said, actually, he did it once in his career. So that's the trick, right? So, Chris was mentioning, oh, those, new young guys and gals who are coming out, right? They don't have the Rolodex. They don't know the Fazes of the world or Rich or Conley or Chris. How do they do it? And so the tip and hint for our entrepreneurs is that you got to have to recruit an advisor who knows us. And then you at least have a shot on goal to get money out of us for never, ever meeting us in person. So that's like one tip I have for you all. And then, how do you do that? I don't know, LinkedIn, your, family, friends, who knows, professors. If you could get them on your team at some shape or fashion as an advisor, as, maybe operations, would be great. The other thing that wasn't mentioned here, though everyone mentioned everything was excellent. So thank you, Faz, Conley, and Chris. The one thing was the clinical trials. So I was on an earnings call with a publicly traded company that acquired one of our assets. And they were saying, how are they going to deal with COVID? How are you going to do patient recruitment? And how are you going to look at the data? And then also I was on a pitch after that earnings call. I was on a pitch with a young company raising 12 million. Because of COVID, institutional investors are coming in and raised the raise to 25 million. I asked the same question about how are you going to handle these trials. And on the earnings call with a publicly traded company, the expert there was very clear: remote monitoring, taking the data to do in-house monitoring. They had a very good explanation. They said where it was in the country, meaning, for instance, in this case, it was someplace where there wasn't really a lockdown. It's very spacious. They could do it. However, the little company, the startup company that was raising 25 million, their response was, oh, Andrea, I know someone at the clinical trial. So if you're going to have clinical trials, even if you're not there yet, at least know that there is a path, there is a playbook. Please learn it what it is. And when you're asked that question, please say that remote data, all the things, that not just because you know someone. So those are my two little pieces.
Good advice from everybody. One of the other things that is being asked by everybody right now is, all of you have existing portfolios. And some of those companies are going through challenging times, just like the times we're all going through right now. So how do you balance your existing portfolio while you're also getting all inundated with contacts who want new money who you've never invested in before? So tell us a little bit about the balance that you have between managing your existing portfolio of companies as well as looking at new investment opportunities. And we'll go back to Foz again and work our way around the horn.
Yeah, that's a great question, Rich. There isn't an easy answer to that. The way that I've been approaching this has been due to my network. So I have a lot of trusted partners who have taken on either board seats or advisory roles with these companies. And so I have the ability to at least feel like I'm distributed. So if they need me, I am there. I have taken on active advisory roles for a handful of companies where I know I can add value. I'm on the board of one of the companies, again, where I know I can add value. And so it is very difficult to keep, and there's a portfolio of companies where I'm not active, but I have friends who are. And many of them, are reaching out for connections to capital specifically. That's what's needed right now. And it is very difficult to be constantly trying to do what you're doing on a regular basis, which is managing the inbox and managing some new opportunities while trying to be helpful to portfolio companies. So at the end of the day, you can only do so much. Every day seems pretty blurry. I don't know what day today even is, but somehow we all manage to connect the dots and be helpful. And so it's a distributed plan. You have to have a bunch of trusted partners.
Well, Foz, for your benefit, it's Monday, June 1st, 2020. We're all alive and well on this call. Hopefully everybody listening is. Conley, how about from your perspective? Because as you're the most active investor in life sciences in the country, you've got a large portfolio. Plus, with 30 million square feet of wet lab space, you have lots of opportunities for investment. Plus, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 66% of the investments you do are not located in Alexandria buildings. Is that true, Conley?
Yes. So yeah, there is a kind of misconception that we only invest in our tenants, and that's not the case. As long as a company is doing good, innovative work with our management team and has a clear story, as long as it's within one of our regions, we're always willing to take a look. So yeah, I think we're benefited in some way, being in many of our deals more of a co-investor capacity, where we do have some board seats are in there, but for the most part we're more strategic investors, and it's a lot of phone calls and updates, but for the most part on my end, I'm not sitting through like 200 board meetings, or my team isn't collectively. So in that way, it's a little bit more manageable. But yeah, it's really tough. I think just there's some benefit of people just being trapped in their house, and so I can get on someone's calendar like within 24 hours a lot of the times if I need to. And so that's some silver lining benefit to all of this, is that just I've found certain types of like off-the-cuff communication to just be a little bit easier, and that's been really beneficial as we need information from various portfolio companies or updates. And I think it's just been a very collegial and cordial. We all understand we're in the same environment, so that's been good. In terms of balancing that with new investments, yeah, it's also tricky, because our perspective has been shifted, and our strategy, while on the surface remains the same, we aren't having to do things a little bit differently than we're used to. And so do I foresee an instance this year where we see a whole investment from start to finish completely virtual? I think it's 100% possible. So yeah, it's just, you have to be flexible, and just there's only so much you can control, and so you got to move on and adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Colin. We have a few companies who would like to be a guinea pig with you, to be that first virtual investment in the ARD portfolio. So whenever you we'll send them your way. And then, Chris, from your perspective, sometimes you guys are involved with are really big bucks. So the maintenance of these companies in your existing portfolio are getting teed up for another round or going public. It might get stalled or whatever. How are you guys dealing with the many relationships Morgan has nationally and globally, and balancing that with the new relationships?
Yeah, it's been an interesting period. It's week 12 of our stay at home, and no end in sight. But to follow on to Foz and Conley, we've been able to get more conversations because people aren't traveling, they're not going to conferences. We've been able to get access, and even if it's a 20-minute to 30-minute conversation, the information that you glean in those conversations are phenomenal. What's been interesting is we haven't been having to deal with a lot of companies that are troubled, right? It's because most of the companies are pretty well capitalized, and if there's been any delays as a result of clinical trials, guess what? Cash is staying in the bank, and it's this, and they're doing other work in year of doing clinical trials, and once those clinical trials come back up, they're up and ready to roll. What we've seen is because of the pandemic, some companies, because they're not doing clinical trials, have been able to take a step back and evaluate their programs and say, we've got multiple products in our platform. What are we going to chase? And so they've been able to do that. The new money, as we said before, those inbounds, again, it's been easier than in the past because everyone is open to conversations. If you look at big pharma, we talk to our investment bank all the time, and they're saying the BDs and the big pharma are open for conversation. Yeah, previously it would be difficult to get a conversation. They're ready to talk. They may not be doing a ton of big M&A, but they're doing M&A, but they're absolutely open to conversations, and that's good. And so we've been facilitating a lot of those conversations, and it's funny about the virtual environment we live in right now. A lot of our companies are going to IPO after they've done a crossover round. Many of those investors said we would never invest in a company for an IPO or crossover round if we didn't give them a handshake. Guess what? They've got capital to deploy. They can't sit on it. The interest rates are so low. They have to earn some kind of return. So guess what? They're making deals, and deals are happening. So us as a as a group are very fortunate to be in the life science healthcare space. And I count my blessings every day that we are in the space. And what's really nice is that we are trying to develop an ecosystem that hopefully will come up with a solution and get us back to our normal lives.
Yeah, here. That was, fabulous. I don't know what more to add, but I think the original question was, how are we balancing our existing portfolio company needs and financing versus the new money deploying into new assets? And it's so true, Chris. I agree. We're so grateful to be in biohealth. It's really survived that. However, I must admit, early on in one of my portfolio companies, it's makes 12 million. It does business all over the world and in China. And when China was shut down, that's when they started looking for money. Not because just bridge money. And at the time, I didn't know what this virus was. I was like, what the heck is this? And they started sending it. This was in December, January. They started coming to us and saying, we just need a little bit of bridge money, not a lot, just in case, because we're hearing we're just seeing a lot of scary stuff. And that really alerted us and our cohort of investors to lock down and save cash. So when it did come into the US, they were able to buffer. So what is this take-home message for the entrepreneurs? Is that luckily your investors have ears and eyes around the globe, and hopefully they're watching your back. So you got to be with investors who do that, who have that experience, because it'll help you not just through now, obviously now, but also in the future. So it's a partnership. It's a kind of marriage, right, between the entrepreneur and their investors. Just pick wisely. And then one question I did have for Chris, because I hadn't had a chance to talk to you. I was really hoping to. Reverse merge. So I was on a call the other day and they said, oh, IPO, but instead of doing IPO, what will arise out of this crisis will be the shell, the publicly traded shell, and you reverse IPO into it. Have you really seen that, Chris? Do you mind? Sorry, Rick.
There's been an increased search for those kind of companies. I would say one thing, right? It is terrific that if you find a company that has cash, that's a public company, and you reverse merge into that, but you need to have a story, right? You cannot have a flowering asset and say, well, I just need a little bit of capital to get it going. You must have an asset you think you can move along with that cash. And guess what? Equity investors in public markets want a story, and they want it quarterly. So if you come and you don't have that story on a quarterly basis, and there's not some kind of progress, you're gonna have a struggling public offering. And the cost of a public entity is not cheap, right? It's roughly $2 million a year just in costs. And then the scrutiny you're under, running a public company versus a private company is not easy. And then you have to think about the investor base, right? If you have a retail investor base versus institutional, any kind of negative noise, that retail investors are going to leave, whereas the institutional investors have long-term money. So that's what I would think about in terms of reverse mergers. But we're seeing more of them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left, so we're going to do words of wisdom from our distinguished panel. Each person gets about a minute to close. And I think we should really focus more on the entrepreneurs raising capital, whether it's first time, follow on, or needs. Words of wisdom you have for those people who are out there listening, hoping that there's a source out there that can help finance them during this interesting time. So Foz, we'll start with you to close. And if you'd like to, feel free to give people your email address, because I know you don't have enough emails coming in today. And this would be good for all of you, so we could stimulate some more conversations with people you don't know, right?
True. So foz@possibletarian.com. That's my email address. But what the advice I give to everyone is truly in this time period, it's important to have a network. So build your network. Build your network as strong as you possibly can. Reach out to your friends, reach out to your colleagues, build a strong network. Learn how to show your personality through mediums like this one. Because really at the end of the day, we're all looking for what Chris said earlier, which is we're all looking for stories, whether it's at the early stage level or at the IPO level. We're looking for good stories. We're looking for genuine, authentic people that have principles, that have character, that are trustworthy. And this medium has a way of doing that. And again, at the end of the day, we all still want to meet each other, but find a way to do that and use technology to your benefit. And when it comes to the question of shaking hands or not, there are new ways of doing that. And one of them is, remember this from, so there's they don't shake hands on Star Trek. Remember that, right? It's live long and perspire.
Finally, your shot.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, echoing that, definitely build your network, use this time wisely, just for even just calls, intro calls, try to get on video as much as possible. I think we were all kind of resistant to that at first, but it does make a pretty big difference, even if just day-to-day calls with your coworkers. I think the more you can get used to it and natural doing it, it does really let personality come through better than just the phone alone. I would also say maybe just use this time to kind of, well, for two things. Again, I would reiterate, look at potential non-dilutive funding opportunities that could help you kind of just extend runway during this time if operations have been affected in some way, if timelines are being lengthened, due to everything going on. And I would also say maybe if you're in active fundraising mode, just use this time to maybe just clean up your story. If you haven't, updated your decks in a while, if you're still using old slides, just make sure it's as tight and clean as possible, because, storytelling in the digital age is so much more important when you can't meet face to face. And so, it's very helpful in a virtual context to have, just something that's very clear, very polished, to look at, when absent, just kind of other cues that you would get in real life. So I guess that would be some of my advice.
And if anybody wants to contact you, Connolly?
Yes, cjones@are.com.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, right? And these are not specific to COVID, situation but one thing I find is a lot of startup companies say we have this great technology, and we saw, Beam Therapeutics or whomever just went public, and my product is much better than theirs. Great, that's wonderful. And so now your company's worth $1 billion, and you just came out of the gates. What I say to you is,
Yeah, right.
stay even keeled, be persistent, don't give up. It's a long process. It's not a quick hit. You know, you'll be an overnight 10-year success. That's what it really is, right? So this, you know, keep your head in the game. Trust your value in terms of your product. I find a lot of times we've seen, especially now with COVID-19, you see a lot of companies pivot to COVID-19 because they think, well, that's the quick way of getting money, right? And raising capital.
Yeah.
And it takes them away from the product that they know how, and they have the technology and they have the expertise. Stay the course. You're gonna have ups and downs. So that's
Okay.
Everyone
Chris, your contact information, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
oh sorry, it's christian.barrow@jpmorgan.com.
And that's Barrow.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody gets it right, Chris.
Thank you.
Andrea, closing comments.
Yes, closing comments. So my email address, ALMS, like alms for the poor, ALMS, at biohealthinnovation.org. And closing comments, everyone said such amazing things. I didn't know what to add except for one thing or two, which is patient compliance. So the pain in the market, who is your actual buyer? And I leave you with a story. I was on a call with an entrepreneur, and they were doing, you know, COVID masks, you know, those type of consumables. And another of the investors said, you know, what am I going to do? I sent the older seniors, they want to be out. They don't want to. There was this report in the Wall Street Journal saying in France, the seniors of 90-year-old and plus were revolting. They just wanted to be out in society and be with people. And the investor said, yeah, my 90-year-old grandmother, she's going to Mahjong, and I wish she would put her mask on. So it's patient compliance. Even though you may have invented the best thing in sliced bread, if your patient's not going to be using it, really want it and embrace it. So that's also another thing. It's a product, but also the patient at the end of the day. Is it going to benefit them, and are they going to accept it? So thank you.
Thank you very much. We're coming to a close. We might be a few minutes over, but Brianna at Resi is going to let us talk since everything was so profound on this panel. But I want to thank the four panelists that we've had today on raising early stage capital in difficult times. Thank Conley Jones from Alexandria Real Estate Ventures, Faz Bashi, Angel from Silicon Valley, also working nationally. Christopher Barrow with JP Morgan, and Andrea Alms with BioHealth Innovation. And I am Rich Bendis with BioHealth Innovation. My email address is rbendis@biohealthinnovation.org. I want to thank Resi for this opportunity for us to get together during this time so we can help provide a little guidance or education to those out there trying to raise capital. And tune in for some of the other Resi events June 8th through the 10th, because I think they create a great platform for all of us to stay connected during this difficult time. So panel, thank you very much.